Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Tanvi Khurana and with me is Nishit Kumar, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh says nuclear option should not be resorted by Russia or Ukraine as usage of nuclear or radiological weapons goes against basic tenets of humanity. Global fight against terrorism cannot be compromised for narrow political games, says India's Deputy Permanent Representative at the UN R. Ravindra. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar emphasizes that India-China relations based on three mutual principles of respect, sensitivity and interest. United States appreciates India's vaccine manufacturing capacity. India asks its citizens residing in Ukraine to leave the country at the earliest by any available means. UN Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee meets to be held in Mumbai and Delhi on 28th and 29th of this month. UK PM Rishi Sunak reshuffles cabinet, retains many from the Truss cabinet. Indian Coast Guard rescues 20 Bangladeshi fishermen from the sea off Sagar Island near Indo-Bangladesh International Maritime Border Line. In Johor Cup, Team India scores last-minute goal against Australia to bring the match to a draw by 5-5. And in football, Colombia enters final of the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup tournament, beating Nigeria in a penalty shootout. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh held a telephonic conversation with the Defense Minister of Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, on Wednesday at the latter's request. During the conversation, both ministers discussed bilateral defense cooperation as well as the deteriorating situation in Ukraine. Mr. Shoigu briefed the Defense Minister on the evolving situation in Ukraine, including his concerns about possible provocations through use of dirty bomb. A dirty bomb is a radiological weapon that combines radioactive material with conventional explosives. Unlike the cloud of radiation from a typical fission bomb, a dirty bomb's radiation can be dispersed only within a few hundred meters or a few miles of the explosion with annihilation. Mr. Singh reiterated India's position on the need to pursue the path of dialogue and diplomacy for an early resolution of the conflict. He pointed out that the nuclear option should not be resorted to by any side as the prospect of the usage of nuclear or radiological weapons goes against the basic tenets of humanity.
India's vaccine manufacturing capacity has been appreciated by the United States. White House COVID-19 response coordinator Ashish Jha said in a briefing that India is a major exporter of vaccines to the world. He termed India's vaccine manufacturing capacity as incredible. The COVID-19 response coordinator's statement came in response to a question asking him about his views on India's handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Earlier in February, the ambassador of India to the United States, Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, had said that the India-US vaccine manufacturing capabilities can be combined for producing affordable vaccines. India has said that the global fight against terrorism cannot be compromised for narrow political games. During a United Nations Security Council meeting on Syria on Tuesday, India's Deputy Permanent Representative at the UN, R. Ravindra, said that the international community should also display zero tolerance towards terrorism, noting that India is against the use of chemical weapons by anybody, anywhere, at any time, and under any circumstances. The envoy said that India attaches high importance to the Chemical Weapons Convention and stands for its full, effective, and non-discriminatory implementation. The Deputy Permanent Representative also highlighted that the sustained engagement between Syria and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, is essential to resolve all outstanding issues. Mr. Ravindra also underlined India's sustained commitment to extending developmental assistance and human resource development support to Syria.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has emphasized that the development of India-China relations is guided by three mutual principles of respect, sensitivity and interest. During his meeting with Chinese Ambassador Sun Weidong in New Delhi, the External Affairs Minister said that peace and tranquility in the border areas are essential. In a tweet on Wednesday, Dr. Jaishankar said that he received Ambassador Weidong for a farewell call. The 27th Annual UN Meeting on Climate COP27 27th Conference of Parties will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt from 6th of November to 18th of November. This will be the fifth time a climate conference will be hosted in Africa. More than 200 governments are invited to participate. It is yet to be decided which countries will participate and which will not. The region's governments hope it will draw attention to the severe impacts of climate change on the continent. The IPCC says Africa is one of the most vulnerable regions in the world. COP27 will focus on three main areas that include reducing emissions, helping countries to prepare and deal with climate change and securing technical support, and also funding for developing countries for climate activities. Some of the issues that were not fully resolved or taken up at the last conference, COP26, like providing money to help countries recover from the effects of climate change, establishing a global carbon market to price the effects of emissions into products and services globally, and also strengthening the commitments to reduce coal use will also be taken up at this edition of the conference. There will also be days with specialized themes for focused talks and announcements on issues including gender, agriculture and biodiversity.
Envoys of 5 nations presented their credentials to President Draupadi Murmu on Wednesday. Ms. Murmu accepted credentials from High Commissioner of Uganda and ambassadors of Vietnam, Iran, Sweden and Belgium at a ceremony held at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Those who presented their credentials were Ms. Joyce Kakuramatsi Kikafunda, High Commissioner of the Republic of Uganda, Mr. Nguyen Tan Hai, Ambassador of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Dr. Iraj Elahi, Ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Mr. Jan Feslev, Ambassador of Sweden, and Mr. Didier van der Hasselt, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Belgium. New UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reshuffled his cabinet, retaining Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor, Ben Wallace as Defence Secretary, while appointing Dominic Raab as the Deputy Prime Minister and Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. Conservative Party tweeted that Jeremy Hunt was reappointed as UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer. Dominic Raab has been appointed as the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. Ben Wallace has been reappointed as Defence Secretary. Suella Braverman has been reappointed as Home Secretary. Penny Mordaunt has been reappointed as the Leader of the House of Commons. She will also assume the role of Lord President of the Council again as the presiding officer of the Privy Council. Gillian Keegan has been appointed the Secretary of State for Education. Indian origin British Minister Alok Sharma lost his cabinet position in Prime Minister Sunak's reshuffle. Jeremy Cleverly has been reappointed as the Foreign Secretary. Simon Hart has been appointed as the new Chief Whip in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, replacing Wendy Morton. Nadeem Zahawi will remain in the cabinet despite initially backing Boris Johnson in the leadership race. Oliver Dowden has been appointed Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Downing Street has confirmed Sunak officially became the UK Prime Minister after meeting King Charles III at Buckingham Palace.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Rishi Sunak and India-UK ties. In conversation are Bhaswati Mukherjee, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist.
Rishi Sunak, who traces his ancestry to India, has become Britain's first ever person of colour to become Prime Minister. He was invited by King Charles III on Tuesday to head the British government. Mr. Sunak has many firsts to his credit as he breaks perhaps the ultimate glass ceiling, taking over as Prime Minister of a nation that once ruled over India, which was a jewel in its crown as the British Empire. He is the youngest British Prime Minister in over 2 centuries. and the first non-Christian to hold that position. Mr. Sunak is a practicing Hindu. India has warmly greeted news of his elevation to the premiership of Great Britain and particularly hopes that there might now be forward movement on the free trade agreement between the two countries. Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee joins us this evening to explain what Mr. Sunak's premiership could mean for the bilateral relationship and hopefully for the stabilization of the global economy. Good evening, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Good evening, Nilufa.
Why is Mr. Rishi Sunak's elevation to the premiership of Britain important? And what does it mean beyond the symbolism in real terms for both Britain and for India and the bilateral partnership?
His elevation, in my perspective, is very rich in symbolism because let us not forget that India has traveled a long journey from 1757, Battle of Plassey, to a couple of days ago in October 2022 when somebody of Indian origin has moved into 10 Downing Street. Moreover, let us not forget that if the empire was good news for the white inhabitants of the United Kingdom, the empire brought tragedy, Jallianwala Bagh, the Great Bengal Famine, where 3 million died, and many other things, including the loss of the Kohinoor, to India. And finally, in 47, left India bleeding and partitioned. The symbol is very rich, but it is not just the symbol we should think of, but also what it means in real terms. He is not the first non-Christian because Disraeli was a Jew, but he is the first non-white, and indeed that is very symbolic, particularly for the Conservative Party, which had always been regarded as the bastion of conservatism. But why was he selected by an overwhelmingly white majority Conservative Party MPs is because clearly England has moved away from the colonial hang-up to a large extent and looks to Rishi to bring that steady hand on the economy which the United Kingdom so badly needs after Brexit, which has not gone well for the economy, the effect of the pandemic, and the effect of the unilateral sanctions on Russia after the Ukraine-Russia conflict. All this has meant that Britain is on the cusp of a recession, and it's generally felt that Rishi Sunak has all qualifications, professional qualifications, regardless of the color of his skin or where he comes from, to put the UK back on track. That again is not symbolic, it's substantive. And that again is very important that a person of Indian origin commands the confidence of the Conservative Party to put Britain back on track. So I would say both are very rich. The symbolism is very rich, but the substance is even more important.
Mr. Sunak's rise, as you correctly pointed out, also makes a very strong statement about the quality of the Indian diaspora worldwide, which is increasingly visible in top leadership positions in countries across the globe, politically as well as in every major sphere. Mr. Sunak himself has attributed his rise to the emphasis his parents laid on education. And so what exactly does this say about the Indian diaspora? Is it because, why is it that they can rise to these kinds of leadership positions and do so well globally?
Absolutely. Our Indian diaspora actually are an example of how they have seamlessly adopted the country, their new country of adoption, how they have been able to blend with the social customs while at the same time keeping up the traditions which they learned as Indians, hard work, honesty, integrity, education, family values. In the case of Mr. Rishi Sunak, he was brought up on Sanatan Dharma. He had a simple upbringing, and he and his wife, although they are both very, very rich, would like the same for their own children. These are Indian values which the diaspora has brought to every corner of the world where they are diaspora. And the Indian diaspora today, the second largest, I'm told, after China, is one of the diasporas which have never attracted any adverse comment at all because they work very hard, they climb up, they have excellent academic and professional qualifications, and they bring a lot of profit to their new countries, which is why, for instance, in the UK, the Indian diaspora is today very powerful, and Rishi Sunak himself is a proud representative of the Indian diaspora. His grandparents immigrated from undivided India, Punjab, and then thereafter made their way into the UK, and he's born a British citizen. But no doubt he comes with all the richness of India's culture and civilization, and that is going to hold him in good stead in the months and years to follow.
Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has called Mr. Sunak a living bridge between our two countries. Now, how do you believe, is it going to afford the bilateral relationship any special benefits, do you feel?
I think that the bridge between the two countries, which is so appropriate, and what our Prime Minister has said, is to show that Mother India remains interconnected with her children. The diaspora are the children of Mother India. Many of them went as indentured labour and then rose to leadership positions all over the world or in United Kingdom, where they have really made an impact. So I think the bridge is the bridge between the two countries. Then the bridge is the bridge between India's children and Mother India. As far as Rishi Sunak is concerned, I think it is important to acknowledge that he's been selected by the British as the best British citizen to lead Britain. We respect that. We expect him to do his best for Britain. Britain would come first for him. But there is no doubt that it would give a huge boost to the bilateral relationship precisely because of who he is and where he comes from. There's no doubt about it. And the first test would be whether this famous India-UK FTA, which got delayed unfortunately because of the change in prime ministerships, etc. It was supposed to be ready by Diwali. Whether it will be ready by the end of this year, that itself would be a great boost to the bilateral relationship, the FTA.
Mr. Sunak had his first cabinet meeting today, and they've decided to put off the British kind of mini budget and announcement of economic policy till the 17th of November. So I would assume also therefore that the India-UK bilateral free trade agreement also gets marginally delayed. The fact that he's brought Suella Braverman back as the Home Secretary for Britain, do you think that, given some what unfortunate comments she made recently, do you think that that might sort of be a little bit a small hurdle perhaps in the relationship, or do you think that now things will be moving a lot smoother?
I don't think it will be a hurdle because for one thing she will be much more careful in her public utterances. She has been brought in by the new Prime Minister because she goes to the right-wing conservative fringe of the Conservative Party. He has brought in a junior minister for immigration. So immigration has been taken away from her. The minister is going to handle immigration and immigration issues. And the FTA is at an advanced stage of negotiation between the Ministry of Trade and Commerce of the two countries. So the Home Secretary of UK has no role to play. As far as the Mobility Pact is concerned, on which she made some rather unpleasant remarks, off the cuff I do hope, this has really no impact because the British side is very well aware that you cannot have a free trade agreement with an economy of India's size, which has overtaken the UK and the United Kingdom, without the freedom of travel between the two countries. So that's something which is also a WTO obligation. I don't think that the UK Home Secretary will be able to hold that up at all. In fact, it was almost ready to go. So what he has postponed till 17th of November are internal issues relating to how to kickstart the British economy, etc. One way to start the British economy is to do actually what the UK had been trying and hoping after Brexit, which was to conclude free trade agreements with major economies, United States, India, etc. It was on that basis that Boris Johnson was able to sell Brexit to the British public. The UK has not been able to conclude any free trade agreement with any major economy so far. And they are without the protection of the agreements of the European Union, left European Union. So they need the FTA much more than India needs the FTA. And I don't see Ms. Braverman, for all her brave words, really holding up the FTA.
The India-Britain relationship, even economically, is a very strong one. And how do you think both countries would particularly benefit from this particular FTA? Of course, as you said, Britain stands to gain perhaps more than even India. But the fact that Britain is a P5 country, and how will this FTA really move things along in terms of, would it particularly help investments or services? Where effect provide the most visible effects?
One of the impediments to the FTA in the first instance was the fact that both Britain and India are service economies. That's our strength. And that is exactly why the British negotiators were reluctant to give any space on services. That's been sorted out. India is one of the largest investors in UK And Indians own more real estate today in London than any other foreign community. Moreover, we've taken over some very well-known British brands. But what we can benefit from the UK are in those niche areas of technical expertise as well as on defense production, etc., where we see a very promising collaboration with them. Their being a P5 country has meant that we have a strategic partnership with them. They have endorsed our candidature for permanent membership. So all that flows from P5. But the FTA would actually result in greater wealth and prosperity for both countries. Much more for UK actually than for India, but also for India. And it would result in niche technology flowing into India, which would help us, for instance, in our quest to become independent in semiconductors, in the Prime Minister's repeated injunctions that India should now start producing for itself, for defense equipment, etc., be self-sufficient, Atmanirbhar Bharat, all that will be facilitated by the FTA. So the FTA is also very important to India. There's no doubt about it.
So the FTA will include a very large component of defense production and defense collaboration, right? Because that has been one of Britain's strengths over the years, and it's an area that we are looking to particularly enhance our capabilities in.
Yes, their R&D is very good. And we are developing our R&D, and we are now actually going into our own defense production. And of course, it would be helpful to have the British on board, which they said they are. And there are many other ways in which we can, for instance, share our expertise, for instance, in third countries, Africa, for instance. And there are many, many ways in which we can collaborate. Once these artificial trade barriers are removed, the two countries can move ahead together. And I'm confident that if not by the end of the year, by very early next year, I think it was almost ready for Diwali actually. So nothing to stop us from doing it, let's say by 26th January next year for our Republic Day.
You've been involved in a lot of the negotiations for free trade agreements with major European countries and with the European Union. So is it different, or are there large elements that are similar to the standard format of a free trade agreement?
When we were negotiating the India-EU FTA, it's called the BTIA actually, one of the impediments actually, ironically, was the UK. Because the UK did not want the European Union to make concessions on services because they are a service-strong economy like India. Nor did they want any concessions on mobility because of the concerns which Ms. Braverman rather undiplomatically articulated. So their departure from the EU has facilitated and kick-started negotiations on the India-EU BTIA, which is very ironical. At the same time, what held them up in EU has now been removed bilaterally because they no longer have the protection of the European Union. They need to have the FTA. So they are ready to make concessions which they were not ready to do when they were negotiating with India as a bloc. Now that they are negotiating bilaterally, they cannot hide behind the bloc. They have to accept they are a service economy, we are a service economy. There has to be give and take on both sides. Why should just India give? India will give if Britain gives. It's a give and take. It has to be, the FTA has to be on equal terms. And that, in fact, was earlier a problem when the Indian economy was not so big. But now that we've opened the British economy, it's now much easier to get the FTA done on a basis of sovereign equality. It has to be on the basis of sovereign equality.
It sounds fairly positive, and I think we can look forward to interesting times with Mr. Sunak's assumption of the premiership of Great Britain. Thank you very much. We've run right out of time. Thank you so much, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Thank you so much.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates around the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle @AIR News Alerts. The Indian Coast Guard ICG rescued 20 Bangladeshi fishermen from the sea after the cyclone Sitrang landfall in the country. The ICG in a social media post said that the fishermen were rescued from the sea on October 25th in a coordinated research and rescue operation. The Bangladeshi fishermen were sighted by a Coast Guard Dornier aircraft which was on the surveillance sortie after the cyclone Sitrang landfall. They were near the Indo-Bangladesh International Maritime Border Line, about 90 nautical miles from Sagar Island in West Bengal. The fishermen were clinging to the floats and debris floating in the sea after their fishing boat sank. The fishermen will be handed over to Bangladesh in accordance with the existing MOU between the two countries, said ISG. Indian citizens in Ukraine have been advised to leave that country by available means immediately. In an advisory, Embassy of India in Kyiv, Ukraine said that they may contact the embassy for any guidance and assistance if required to travel to the border. They can contact the embassy on the given phone numbers +38 0933 559958, +38 06 35 91 7881, +38 06 78 74 5945. Indian citizens can also refer to the embassy website for available options for border crossing.
Minister of State for External Affairs and Parliamentary Affairs V. Muralidharan was on a two-day official visit to the Republic of Senegal from 24 to 25th of October to participate in the 8th edition of the Dakar International Forum on Peace and Security in Africa. The Dakar Forum was attended by the presidents of Senegal, Angola and Cabo Verde, along with over 15 ministers and high-level dignitaries from 29 countries. The forum has become a key event for policy discussions on Africa. This is the first time that India participated at the ministerial level. In FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup, Colombia reached at the final of the tournament by defeating Nigeria in penalty shootout by 6-5 at the Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium in Goa. In the other match, Spain will clash with Germany in the semi-finals of the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup at the same venue.
The Indian junior men's hockey team scored a last-minute goal to play out a thrilling 5-5 draw against Australia and occupy the second spot in round-robin league standings of the Sultan of Johor Cup here on Wednesday. Amandeep, 60th minute, saved India with a final minute strike after Bobby Singh Dhami, 2nd, Sharda Nand Tiwari, 8th, 35th and Arijit Singh Hundal, 18th, found the Australian net. India came out all guns blazing in search of the equalizer and Amandeep rescued his side by finding the net seconds before the final hooter. In the T20 World Cup 2022, the match between New Zealand and Afghanistan at the Melbourne Cricket Ground was abandoned due to rain on Wednesday. Both the teams received 1 point each, and with this, New Zealand have maintained their position at the top of the points table in Super 12 Group 1.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Financial Times says ECB to start talks on shrinking balance sheet amid bond market turmoil. The Guardian writes that at least 230 Sudanese villagers killed in tribal attacks over disputed land. The Wall Street Journal reports that Russian oligarchs obscured their wealth through secretive Isles of Man network. The Washington Post, quoting a report, says European allies worry US could dial back support for Ukraine. Japan Times informs that outlook darkens for Biden's White House ahead of the US midterms.
And a quick look at the headlines once again. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh says nuclear option should not be resorted by Russia or Ukraine as usage of nuclear or radiological weapons against basic tenets of humanity. Global fight against terrorism cannot be compromised for narrow political gains, says India's Deputy Permanent Representative at the UN, R. Ravindra. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar emphasizes that India-China relations based on three mutual principles of respect, sensitivity and interest. United States appreciates India's vaccine manufacturing capacity. India asks its citizens residing in Ukraine to leave the country at the earliest by any available means. UN Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee meet to be held in Mumbai and Delhi on 28th and 29th of this month. UK PM Rishi Sunak reshuffles cabinet, retains many from the Truss cabinet. Indian Coast Guard rescues 20 Bangladeshi fishermen from the sea off Sagar Island near Indo-Bangladesh International Maritime Border Line. In Johor Cup, Team India scores last-minute goal against Australia to bring the match to a draw by 5-5. And in football, Colombia enters final of the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup tournament, beating Nigeria in a penalty shootout. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Australia.
Vaishnav Jan to
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.